The Vraks were the undisputed apex predators of the galaxy, a species that had risen to dominance through a combination of raw power, advanced technology, and an unwavering belief in their own superiority. Standing over 7 feet tall, with muscular, reptilian bodies covered in thick, scaled armor, the Vraks were built for war. Their eyes, cold and predatory, gleamed with the intelligence of seasoned hunters, and their sharp, serrated teeth were a constant reminder of their carnivorous nature. Every aspect of their physiology was designed to instill fear, and for countless civilizations, the sight of a Vrax warship on the horizon meant one thing: the end. Vrax society was built on the principles of strength and dominance. From the moment they were born, Vraks were taught that they were the ultimate life form, destined to rule over all others. Their culture revered the art of combat, and every Vrax warrior was trained from a young age in the use of their advanced weaponry and hand-to-hand combat. They viewed mercy as a weakness and compassion as a flaw, believing that the strong were meant to conquer and the weak to serve. Technologically, the Vraks were unmatched. Their warships were massive, heavily armed behemoths that could devastate entire planets. Their soldiers were equipped with energy weapons that could vaporize enemies in an instant, and their armor was virtually impenetrable, capable of withstanding even the most advanced countermeasures. The Vraks also possessed advanced AI systems that assisted in both strategy and battlefield tactics, allowing them to outmaneuver and outthink their opponents at every turn. It was this combination of brute force and technological superiority that had allowed the Vraks to subjugate or annihilate every species they had encountered. The history of the Vraks was one of relentless conquest. Over the centuries, they had expanded their empire across the galaxy, leaving a trail of destruction in their wake. Entire civilizations had been wiped out, their planets left barren and lifeless after the Vraks had taken what they wanted. Those who were spared were enslaved, forced to labor under the harsh rule of their new masters. Resistance was futile. Any species that dared to stand against the Vraks was swiftly crushed, their defiance erased from history. The Vraks thrived on the fear they instilled in others, and their reputation as the ultimate predators was well earned. It was in this context of dominance that the Vraks began to seek new challenges. Having conquered the known galaxy, they grew restless, eager for fresh prey to test their mettle against. They scoured the stars for new worlds to conquer, new species to subjugate. It was during this search that they discovered humanity, a relatively unknown species on the fringes of the galaxy. To the Vraks, humans appeared weak and unremarkable, a primitive species that had only just begun to explore the cosmos. Their technology, while advanced by their own standards, was laughably inferior to that of the Vraks. Their society, divided by borders and ideologies, seemed ripe for conquest. The Vraks saw humanity as nothing more than another easy victory, another notch in their belt of galactic dominance. Confident in their superiority, the Vraks made the decision to target Earth, the human homeworld. It was to be their next great conquest, a demonstration of their unchallenged power. The Vraks' leadership, sitting in their grand war chambers, planned the invasion with the same meticulous detail that had secured their previous victories. They anticipated little resistance. After all, what could a species as insignificant as humanity do against the might of the Vraks? The outcome, they believed, was already decided. However, as the Vraks prepared for their latest conquest, there were whispers among the few who had studied humanity more closely. These voices, though few and far between, suggested that humans might not be as weak as they seemed. There were stories, rumors really, of human resilience, of their ability to adapt and overcome even the most daunting challenges. Some pointed to humanity's history of survival, their triumphs over natural disasters, wars, and internal strife. But these concerns were dismissed by the Vraks' leadership, who saw them as nothing more than the fears of the timid. The Vraks were predators, and predators did not fear their prey. And so, the stage was set. The Vraks prepared to launch their invasion, confident in the knowledge that they would soon add humanity to their list of conquests. But as their warships gathered on the edge of human space, there was a growing sense of anticipation, an unspoken question that lingered in the air. What if, just this once, the Vraks had miscalculated? What if humanity was not the easy prey they appeared to be? The Vraks had never known fear, But as they prepared to face humanity, a new, unfamiliar sensation began to take root in the hearts of their leaders, a sensation that, if they had recognized it, might have given them pause. The Vrax invasion of Earth began with the precision and confidence that had marked all their previous conquests. Their fleet, a massive armada of warships bristling with advanced weaponry, arrived in Earth's orbit with an almost casual arrogance. The Vrax commanders viewed this mission as routine, another easy victory in a long line of conquests. Their ships, each one capable of obliterating entire cities with a single barrage, positioned themselves above key locations on the planet's surface, major cities, military installations, and communication hubs. They intended to decapitate humanity's ability to respond before the battle had even begun. The first salvo was devastating. Vrax weapons, far beyond anything humanity had ever encountered, rained down on Earth with terrifying force. Entire city blocks were vaporized in an instant, and military bases that had stood for decades were reduced to rubble in moments. The Vrax believed they were witnessing the beginning of the end for humanity. To them, this was merely the prelude to the inevitable capitulation that would follow. After all, every other species they had encountered had crumbled in the face of such overwhelming power. But Earth was different. Humanity, though caught off guard, did not respond with the panic and chaos the Vrax had expected. Instead, they moved with a speed and coordination that surprised even the most seasoned Vrax commanders. Within hours of the first attack, human military forces were mobilizing across the globe. Communications, though disrupted, were quickly restored through secondary and even tertiary networks. Emergency protocols that had been drilled into the populace for decades sprang into action, and civilian volunteers flooded into shelters, ready to support the defense efforts in any way they could. The early skirmishes between the Vrax and human forces were brutal. The Vrax's technological superiority was undeniable. Human aircraft were shot down before they could even engage, and ground forces were obliterated by energy weapons that seemed almost supernatural in their destructive power. The Vrax believed they were seeing the end of human resistance. But then something unexpected happened. The humans adapted. As the Vrax continued their assault, they began to encounter resistance in forms they hadn't anticipated. Human forces, realizing they couldn't match the Vrax in direct confrontations, shifted their tactics. They abandoned conventional warfare and embraced guerrilla tactics, using the terrain, weather, and urban environments to their advantage. Small, highly mobile units began to strike at Vrax supply lines, ambush their patrols, and sabotage their equipment. In the dense forests, mountain ranges, and sprawling urban centers, human soldiers became ghosts, striking quickly and then disappearing before the Vrax could retaliate. The Vrax, used to overwhelming their enemies with sheer force, found themselves facing an enemy they couldn't easily target. Their advanced sensors were often confused by the environment, and their superior firepower was rendered less effective against an opponent that refused to engage in a straightforward battle. The Vrax began to suffer losses, not large enough to turn the tide of the war, but significant enough to sow the first seeds of doubt among their commanders. In one particular engagement, a Vrax battalion found itself lured into a dense urban area where their advanced technology became a liability. The humans had booby-trapped the entire sector, and as the Vrax advanced, they triggered a series of explosions that decimated their ranks. Those who survived the initial blasts were picked off by snipers hidden in the rubble. The Vrax, for the first time, experienced the sting of a well-executed ambush. It was a shock to their system. This was not the easy prey they had been led to believe. As the days turned into weeks, the Vrax began to realize that humanity was unlike any species they had encountered before. The humans were relentless in their resistance, refusing to surrender even as the destruction around them mounted. They displayed a resourcefulness and determination that the Vrax had never seen. Every time the Vrax thought they had crushed the human defense, another counterattack would spring up, seemingly out of nowhere. The Vrax commanders, who had once spoken of Earth's conquest with smug certainty, now found themselves issuing increasingly desperate orders. The Vrax had severely underestimated humanity. They had expected a quick, decisive victory, but what they found was a species that fought with a tenacity born of survival instincts honed over millennia. The humans had turned their own planet into a battlefield that even the Vraks, with all their technology, found difficult to navigate. The Vraks were beginning to experience something new: frustration. And with it, the first inklings of fear. The early stages of the invasion had not gone as planned. The Vraks' confidence began to waver as they realized they were facing an enemy that could adapt and evolve faster than they had anticipated. The humans, once considered an easy target, were proving to be a formidable opponent. Humanity's ability to adapt became the cornerstone of their defense as the conflict with the Vraks intensified. In the early stages of the invasion, humans were forced to endure staggering losses, but they quickly learned from their encounters. What the Vraks had mistaken for a lack of strength was actually a hidden resilience, born from centuries of surviving on a planet filled with natural disasters, conflicts, and adversity. As the Vraks pressed their assault, human strategists began to notice patterns in their enemies' tactics and identified vulnerabilities that could be exploited. The Vraks, for all their technological superiority, were rigid in their approach to warfare. They relied on brute force and direct confrontation, tactics that had served them well against less resourceful foes. But Earth's diverse terrain, unpredictable weather, and densely populated urban environments proved to be a challenge they had not anticipated. Human forces, recognizing this, began to craft strategies that played to these strengths. They utilized the dense forests, mountain ranges, and sprawling cities to create traps that would lure Vraks units into vulnerable positions. In the mountains, human soldiers used the rugged landscape to their advantage, setting up ambushes that left Vraks patrols decimated. In the cities, the concrete jungles became a battlefield where small, agile units of humans could strike quickly and then disappear, leaving the heavily armored Vraks forces struggling to keep up. Even the weather became a tool of war. Storms that the Vraks had dismissed as mere inconveniences were used by human forces to mask their movements and launch surprise attacks. This adaptability was coupled with a level of cunning that the Vraks had not expected. Human commanders, drawing from centuries of warfare experience, began to implement unconventional tactics. They staged feints to draw Vraks forces into predetermined kill zones, disrupted supply lines with targeted strikes, and used misinformation to sow confusion among the Vraks' ranks. Guerrilla warfare, sabotage, and psychological tactics became the hallmarks of humanity's resistance, turning what the Vraks had expected to be a straightforward campaign into a quagmire. But it wasn't just strategy that defined humanity's fight back, it was the unwavering determination to survive. Stories of individual bravery and sacrifice began to emerge from the battlefield, each one a testament to humanity's resolve. Soldiers who willingly held the line against overwhelming odds to buy time for their comrades, civilians who risked their lives to sabotage Vraks' equipment, and entire communities that refused to submit, choosing instead to fight to the last person. These acts of heroism weren't isolated incidents. They were the heartbeat of a global resistance that refused to be extinguished. The Vraks, who had long believed in their own invincibility, began to experience something they had never felt before: fear. Their initial confidence was eroded by each unexpected defeat, each ambush that left their forces in disarray. Reports of human tactics spread through the Vraks' ranks, causing confusion and lowering morale. The rigid structure of Vraks' command, which had always emphasized discipline and obedience, began to crack under the strain of continuous, unrelenting human attacks. The turning point in the conflict came with a battle that would be remembered as the first major defeat for the Vraks on Earth. A heavily fortified Vraks stronghold, strategically placed to control a crucial supply route, became the target of a coordinated human assault. The attack was a masterclass in tactical brilliance. Human forces, having studied the stronghold's defenses, executed a series of maneuvers that isolated the Vraks' garrison and cut off their reinforcements. Using a combination of sabotage, diversion, and direct assault, the humans managed to breach the stronghold's defenses and destroy it from within. The destruction of the stronghold sent shockwaves through the Vraks' ranks. For the first time in their history of conquest, they had suffered a defeat that could not be easily dismissed. The Vraks' commanders, who had once viewed humanity as nothing more than prey, were forced to confront the reality that they were now facing a formidable enemy. The humans had not only survived the initial onslaught, but had begun to push back with a ferocity that the Vrax had never encountered. This defeat marked a shift in the Vrax's approach. The overconfidence that had characterized their invasion was replaced with caution. The Vrax commanders began to question their tactics and the effectiveness of their overwhelming force strategy. They had underestimated humanity's capacity for adaptation, and now they were paying the price. The Vrax, for the first time, found themselves on the defensive, forced to regroup and reconsider their options in the face of a growing human threat. As the Vrax retreated to reassess their strategy, the humans pressed their advantage, refusing to give the enemy a moment's respite. What had begun as a desperate defense had transformed into a counteroffensive that was pushing the Vrax back. The balance of power was shifting, and with it, the nature of the conflict. The Vrax, once the undisputed predators of the galaxy, were now coming to understand that they were not invincible. They were facing a species that was not only willing to fight but was capable of winning. This realization brought with it a new level of fear and uncertainty among the Vrax. The very thought that they could be defeated, that the prey could become the predator, was a concept that shook the foundations of their society. The Vrax, now facing the unthinkable possibility of defeat, began to resort to increasingly brutal tactics in a desperate attempt to crush humanity's resistance. The calculated precision that had characterized their initial invasion gave way to a strategy born of fear and frustration. The Vrax, once so confident in their superiority, now saw no other option but to break humanity's spirit through sheer devastation. They unleashed their most powerful weapons, turning entire cities into smoldering ruins. Scorched earth tactics were employed with ruthless efficiency, leaving behind a trail of destruction intended to demoralize the human population. The Vrax targeted civilian populations with cold-blooded intent, believing that by inflicting maximum suffering, they could force humanity into submission. Hospitals, schools, and shelters, places that had once been considered off-limits in conventional warfare, became primary targets. The Vrax sought to strip humanity of any hope, to instill a level of fear so profound that resistance would seem futile. It was a strategy that had worked countless times before, crushing the will of lesser species. But humanity was different. Instead of breaking, humanity's resolve only hardened. The brutal tactics employed by the Vrax did not sow fear, they ignited a fire of defiance. The global population, witnessing the atrocities committed by their enemy, united as never before. Factions that had once been divided by politics, ideology, or geography came together with a singular purpose: to defend their home and drive the invaders from their planet. The Vrax had underestimated the depth of human resilience, and now they were facing a force that grew stronger with every atrocity committed against it. The more the Vrax tried to break humanity's spirit, the more they fueled the determination of their adversary. Resistance cells formed in every corner of the globe, from the remnants of devastated cities to the most remote rural areas. Where the Vrax expected surrender, they found only greater resistance. Communities that had once been disparate were now united by a common cause, their collective strength becoming a force the Vrax had not anticipated. In response to the Vrax's increasingly brutal tactics, humanity began to employ psychological warfare to further demoralize their enemy. Propaganda campaigns were launched, spreading messages of human resilience and the inevitability of Vrax defeat. Sabotage operations targeted Vrax supply lines and communications, creating confusion and chaos within their ranks. Misinformation was fed into the Vrax command structure, leading them to doubt their own strategies and question the loyalty of their subordinates. The predators, who had once believed themselves invincible, now found themselves plagued by paranoia and distrust. These psychological tactics took a heavy toll on the Vrax. The cracks that had begun to appear in their command structure widened into chasms. Once a well-oiled machine of conquest, the Vrax war effort began to falter under the weight of internal dissent and the relentless pressure from human forces. The Vrax, who had always been the hunters, now found themselves in an unfamiliar position. They were being hunted, not just physically, but mentally. The confidence that had once been their greatest strength was now eroding, replaced by a growing fear that they might actually lose this war. The conflict reached its climax in a final, massive battle that would determine the fate of Earth. The Vrax, sensing that they were on the brink of failure, threw everything they had into this last-ditch effort. Their fleet, battered but still formidable, descended upon Earth with a ferocity born of desperation. Every available Vrak soldier was deployed, and their most powerful weapons were unleashed in a bid to crush humanity once and for all. It was a battle of unparalleled scale, with the very survival of both sides hanging in the balance. But humanity, forged in the crucible of war and driven by a relentless will to survive, met the Vraks with a unity and strategy that belied the odds. The lessons learned throughout the conflict were brought to bear in this final stand. Human forces, though outnumbered and outgunned, used every advantage they had: terrain, weather, and the indomitable spirit of their people. They struck with precision, targeting Vrak's vulnerabilities with surgical accuracy. Where the Vraks expected chaos, they found coordination. Where they anticipated fear, they encountered unwavering courage. As the battle raged on, it became clear that the Vraks were not fighting just against human technology or military might. They were fighting against the very essence of human survival. Every inch of ground was contested with a ferocity that took the Vraks by surprise. The humans, who had been underestimated from the start, now proved that their greatest weapon was not in their machines, but in their spirit. They fought not just for victory, but for the right to exist on their own terms. In the end, the Vraks, despite their overwhelming force, could not break the human will. The turning point came when a critical Vrak's flagship, the linchpin of their assault, was destroyed in a coordinated human attack that combined air, land, and cyber warfare. This loss shattered the Vrak's command structure and sent shockwaves through their ranks. The once cohesive invasion force descended into chaos, with commanders issuing conflicting orders and soldiers retreating in disarray. The defeat was decisive. The Vraks, unable to sustain their assault and facing the collapse of their forces, were forced to retreat. Earth, battered and scarred by the conflict, had held the line. Humanity, through sheer determination and unity, had achieved what many thought impossible. They had repelled the galaxy's most feared predators and defended their home. As the Vraks retreated, the significance of their defeat became clear. The predators, who had feared no one, now knew fear themselves. The Vraks were left to contemplate the consequences of their hubris, while humanity emerged from the conflict forever changed. The Vraks' retreat from Earth was a scene of utter humiliation. Their once mighty fleet, which had descended upon the planet with overwhelming confidence, now limped away, battered and broken. The Vraks, who had prided themselves on being the galaxy's ultimate predators, were forced to confront a harsh reality. They had been defeated by a species they had grossly underestimated. The retreat was not just a military withdrawal, it was a retreat from the very identity that had defined the Vraks for millennia. Their pride was shattered, and their reputation as the galaxy's most feared conquerors lay in ruins. As the Vrak ships disappeared into the void, the enormity of their defeat began to ripple through the galaxy. Other species, who had lived in terror of the Vraks for generations, watched in awe as the seemingly invincible predators were driven back by a species that had once been considered insignificant. Humanity, through their unyielding resistance, had accomplished what no other species had dared to even attempt. The message was clear: the Vraks were not invincible, and humanity was not prey. With their victory, humanity earned a new place in the galaxy, a place of respect and recognition. Other civilizations, once oppressed by the Vraks or living in constant fear of their next attack, now looked to humanity as a symbol of hope. The humans, who had faced the galaxy's greatest predators and emerged victorious, became a beacon of resistance against tyranny. No longer seen as a mere backwater species, humanity was now recognized as a force to be reckoned with, a civilization that had proven its mettle in the most trying of circumstances. The impact of the defeat on the Vraks was profound. Their society, which had been united by the belief in their own superiority and the inevitability of their conquest, began to fracture. The first real defeat in their history shook the very foundations of Vraks culture. Factions emerged, each with different views on how to deal with the human threat. Some argued for a renewed and more ruthless assault, while others advocated for a more cautious approach, fearing that further confrontation with humanity could lead to even greater losses. The fear that the Vracs had once inspired in others now turned inward, causing instability within their ranks. The confidence that had once driven their conquests was replaced by doubt and paranoia. Leaders who had never questioned their methods or strategies now found themselves facing internal dissent and challenges to their authority. The Vracs, once a unified force of predatory power, were now grappling with the consequences of their hubris and the reality that they were not invincible. As the galaxy adjusted to this new reality, there was a sense of reflection on the conflict and its broader implications. The Vracs, who had believed that strength came solely from power and domination, were forced to learn a painful lesson. True strength, as demonstrated by humanity, was not just about military might, it was about the will to fight for survival, freedom, and the right to exist on one's own terms. The humans had shown that resilience, unity, and the refusal to be dominated were the ultimate forms of strength. Humanity's victory was not just the triumph of strategy or technology. It was a testament to the unbreakable spirit of a species that refused to surrender, even in the face of overwhelming odds. The conflict had changed the galaxy, challenging long-held assumptions about power and fear. The predators had been humbled, and the prey had risen to take their place among the stars. In the aftermath of the war, both the Vracs and humanity were left to navigate a galaxy that had been irrevocably altered by their conflict. The Vracs, once the embodiment of fear, now faced their own fears as they struggled to rebuild and redefine their place in the galaxy. Humanity, on the other hand, stepped into a new role as defenders of freedom, a role that came with its own challenges and responsibilities. The galaxy had entered a new era, one where the lines between predator and prey were no longer clear-cut. The conflict had shown that strength could be found in the most unexpected places, and that even the mightiest could be brought low by those they had underestimated. As the galaxy moved forward, the lessons of the war between the Vracs and humanity would serve as a reminder that true power lies not in the ability to dominate, but in the resilience to stand firm in the face of adversity.